Hey, hi, and hello, everyone. Welcome to the Talent Table. This is our October edition. I happen to be coming to you live from Spain, so this is a Spanish background. So hopefully all of the internet connections will work, and hopefully there won't be a lot of noise. So we're on the crossing our fingers that all will go well here. So super excited to have two great guests with us here today to talk about things all around HR and AI and all of the things in between. So before we get started, I have a few housekeeping things. So if you look below, you'll see widgets to do things. And then you will see the resources section that you can read things. And then you will see the Q&A section where you can ask things. So those are three things that you actually can do with the platform. And then if we don't get to your questions, we will do our best to add them into a future conversation or a blog post or maybe a future webinar. So thanks so much for being here. Now I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. We have Kristen and we have David. So I'll shoot it over to Kristen first and then on over to David, and then we will do our question of the month. So Kristen, introduce yourself.
Amazing. Thanks, Rebecca. So hi, everyone. Kristen Petitjean. I'm with Bristol Myers Squibb in the People organization. My role is as an HR business partner for our drug development organization. So these are the people doing clinical trials and that sort of thing, a lot of scientists. I came into this role from a skills-based role where I was working in the talent function, really looking at skills development and change and all of those fun things. So happy to talk more about that later.
Awesome. All right, David.
Well, hello, David Forey. I'm a Senior Vice President with Brandon Hall Group. I've been in the HR talent and learning space for 15 years and as an analyst with Brandon Hall Group for the last 9 years. So looking forward to sharing some insights we have. We recently produced an AI progression model and have an AI summit next week. So of course, it's top of mind for me and look forward to being part of this conversation.
All right. And I'm your host, Rebecca Warren. I am part of our talent-centered transformation practice here at Eightfold, where we help people think about talent through the lens of people as opposed to jobs or word charts. Okay, before we jump into all things AI, I have a question. So, cereal. Legit to eat at any time of the day, or is it only acceptable at breakfast before 9 a.m.? Ooh. So let me know. Okay, think about that. Cereal, any time of the day, just for breakfast. Who wants to start?
Can I give a contentious opinion on that one?
Please
Absolutely.
do.
We love spicy cakes. Do it.
Cereal is a dessert. And if you want dessert for breakfast, all the more power to you, but dessert any time of day.
I have never heard cereal called dessert. I absolutely love that. Okay.
It's the amount of sugar.
It's true.
That
Which
is
is
actually
true. Okay.
my take as well. So it's amazing that we synced up. I know you said you had an opinion, but you didn't give it. So it's quite amazing. And I have 3 kids, and we have sugary cereal. Yes, we're healthy. They do triathlons and stuff like that. But
you don't have to justify it.
Yeah, very sugary cereal in my house, and there's no way I'm eating that before 9 a.m. So that is like a late night snack. Kids go to bed, I pull out the Fruity Pebbles, Fruit Loops, those types of things.
Okay, I love that. So funny story, and the reason that this question came up is I typically, I don't eat in the morning. So I fast until after, around lunchtime, so 12 or 1. But my husband and I were jumping on a really early flight. And so he grabbed some snack bags of cereal, right? Like Quaker Oat squares and, that kind of stuff. And we were snacking on it on the plane. And I was like, I forgot how good cereal is for snacking. Like, I don't normally throw it in with the bowl of milk, but just for a snack, right? So I ate some of mine, left it in my bag, and then I was traveling to another location. Husband was home. So 3 a.m, he hears all kinds of noises going on. 2 of our cats had found the bag that was closed, but clearly the cats could smell the sugary goodness floating out through the room, and they shredded the bag open and were diving into my Quaker Oat squares and peanut butter Captain Crunch. in the middle of the bedroom in the middle of the night. So my husband was really happy with me about that. So clearly cats feel like it is a treat at any time of the day or night as well. So,
Well, they also
okay.
view it being closed as a recommendation and not a fact, of, something that you have to keep closed. So
This was a challenge. The
Right,
the zipper on the bag was a challenge. Like, oh, that girl thinks we can't get in there. She is so wrong.
you might as well put catnip in there.
David, I think seriously, that's what I think they thought. They're like, this girl wants me to have this at 3 a.m. when she's not here. All right. Well, I love the cereal, which is a snack that provides goodness anytime, day or night, especially as dessert or a late night movie snack or a 3 a.m. cat treat. So, okay. We are going to dive into our topic for today. So we are talking about AI, HR, and learning. And so we're looking at how agentic AI, especially, is here and reshaping how we work, how we think, how we grow. So we have to think differently as we move through this, and also think about how are we supporting, engaging, and building and equipping our teams to be able to move to this new growth mindset around AI. So my first question, and actually my first statement is going to be, we need to define what this looks like. So if we talk about automation, we talk about Gen AI, and we talk about agentic AI. So I can give a definition of automation, and then I would love to hear if y'all just jump in and give me your definition of Gen AI and the definition of agentic. But when we think about automation, right, that's a rules-based way of getting things done, right? We set the rules. It's an if, and, an or, but. If this happens, then this happens. There's no decision making other than the rules. There's no any kind of intelligence in there. It's an if, then kind of a spreadsheet way of looking at things. So how should we be thinking about Gen AI, my favorite ChatGPT buddy?
Well, I certainly think that this Gen AI has brought out like an alphabet soup for us, because we've been using things like ML, machine learning, or LLM, large language models for years, and those were kind of like the AI go-tos that everybody was used to. And then Gen AI came on and kind of expanded things, and people are still using AI as a general term, and the AI is so different depending on application. So True. When I hear AI or generative AI, I of course ask some questions, and I think the big difference for what a lot of people are looking at is it more of like a RAG model where they're just retrieving information, or is it more of an AI assistant where it's helping you do something? Or is it an AI agent where it's acting on your behalf? And I think for some people, maybe the layperson, doesn't quite understand those different layers. I'm sure everybody listening in today does, but they may have to explain that to people. And being able to explain that to your your business partners on the other side of the house, or just people on your team, it's definitely something that's come up a lot, explaining it.
Yeah, and Kristen, so how do you think about that inside of BMS? Do you have definitions? Have you worked to define that, or are folks still kind of figuring it out and using it independently in different departments?
Oh, absolutely figuring it out in different departments. And what I think is interesting is when we talk about agentic AI, the immediate reaction you hear, because this is fairly recent for a lot of people at BMS, is, wait, there's more? And then how is it different? Right? There's more, and how is it different? That's what we're hearing in the first place. So helping them understand it, and we have demos, right, that are illustrating how it's different. But what's really cool is exactly what you said, David. It's the difference between assisting you with something, maybe internal to that tool, helping you do something, versus the agent crossing tool boundaries, maybe helping you do actual actions, versus just like the assistant and the thought partner side of it.
Right. Yeah, I like to think about Gen AI as kind of my thought partner. Like it creates new things. It looks at a ton of different data, puts it together, sometimes in new ways that we haven't thought about. And so when it hallucinates, sometimes we're like, oh, that's terrible. I just made something up. And I read a futurist who talked about, he goes, I love the hallucinations because it's something new that hasn't existed. So let's be critical of that in the flow of what we were thinking about, but also let's jump on that bandwagon and take those hallucinations and say, where do we go? Because I look at Gen AI as being that creative thought partner. How do I think about things differently?
Mm-hmm.
How can it put things together in different ways? And then when you take that and when you think about agentic AI, right? So you've got now agents who are performing those functions. And if you have an agentic AI workflow, they don't need your input, right? There's still guidelines, kind of guidelines up here and down here, but they don't need you to weigh in order to make a decision or take an action. So they're able to complete an entire workflow without human intervention. Unlike automation, where it's like you have to set this automation for scheduling, for instance. You can automate a scheduling process, but that means, okay, if they say they're available this day, we can put it on the calendar. But what if they say, oh, I'm only available on the next day? Automation doesn't help with that. That's where the use of agents to be able to schedule, where you have a back and forth and they actually can reason, makes such a difference in terms of how work gets done. Okay. So David, I also like that you said, a lot of folks are still figuring this out. Maybe some folks on this webinar have already dialed in, but I'm guessing we've got some folks that are still in that questioning phase. Should we use it? How do we use it? What does that look like? Good, bad, indifferent. So we have to think about these changes now, because the old way of working, what got us here, won't get us there. So when we think about the old way of working, the structures, we talked about org charts and we talked about the way work gets done. And you got, an entry-level person who comes in and moves through the stages, and that's how promotions and career paths used to go. So we're talking about something that's a little bit wild, right? It's something that we don't always have all the answers for. So David, tell me why do we need to transition right now? And why can't we just wait and see what happens? Why do we have to make a move now?
Well, there's a lot of pressures also that we do move quicker as an HR community. So we're hearing it, of course, from the top that we need to utilize more. Some of us are pressured, and Kristen may be able to share a little bit more, but being pressured from the top, or having less employees that they're used to within their department, needing to do more with less. And when you are a publicly traded organization, there's certain measures for keeping costs down. So, that's kind of one area, there's those pressures. And then just needing to produce better things. One thing that we've seen is people have been able to be more creative, with the use of AI. Like you said, the hallucination, they're imagining things that don't exist. When you're in an organization for, 10, 20 years, it's wonderful because you build up a lot of knowledge, but at the same time, you don't have those different entry points that you used to when maybe you were a little bit more junior in your organization, because you came and you had other ideas. So this also gives you an incredible opportunity to think about things that maybe you've never thought of within your organization. So you're kind of getting pressures on both sides. And what you mentioned is like those newer employees that are coming in and being able to utilize this generative AI and agents to really get more out of their work and themselves. And that's one thing that I always like to keep important for the HR professionals, that it is not replacing you, it's making you your own super agent, your own super employee.
Right. Kristen, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your thoughts there.
Yeah, actually, so David, I appreciate that, because that reflects, I think, the conversations we were having 10 years ago when we were talking about automation of things, right? Someone said, but this is what I do. Where will I go? What job will I have? And you could have individuals react pretty negatively. Maybe they don't want to even tell you their process because they're worried that unveiling the mystery behind how we do something means you can automate it and remove me from the process. But what's really interesting from a talent standpoint, an HR standpoint, is when you ask those employees, those same employees, well, what would you like to be doing with your time? You know, let's have a different conversation, that career development conversation. Do you want to punch numbers and keys all day, or what kind of thinking, what kind of development do you want? And almost always it was never, I want to be doing this time consuming, mind numbing task as a part of the process. That's not usually where people want to be spending their time. And so honestly, I think those are packaged messages. Yes, obviously everything David had said, there's the financial implications, there's the resourcing considerations that are helping drive this. Those are those external pieces that they're coming to us regardless of whether we plan for them or not. So if we can plan for them, how can we upskill our employees to understand even how to use AI, how to think with it, and pair that with that development conversation? What would you do if you had more time? And you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very creative of how they would spend that time. Humans have such an amazing capacity for thought, and I don't see that being replaced.
I love what you said there. Maybe we're not asking the right questions, right? Maybe folks in the roles just assume that it's going to always look like this, right? I don't know what that next step looks like. Where could I go, right? And as you said, what if we ask the question, well, like, what would you want to do? And folks all of a sudden are like, oh, wait, I have a choice. I may have options. How do I think about this differently? I love flipping that to be able to give folks that understanding that there is more. And so what that shift also indicates, I think, is that we are moving away from this is your job, you do this until you die, right? Or until you retire. Instead of doing that, this is the job, we now are shifting, and because of AI and the ability to move and to learn new things and to do things more quickly, whether we're adding productivity or effectiveness or, David, you talked about doing more with less. And I always think about adding AI as doing more with more because there's so much more capacity. But
Right.
as we think about doing this now, we are moving away from a very structured way of doing things to, so moving away, what we call that polished processes, I think is what I wrote down here. But now we need to build curious and resilient teams, right? What's around the corner? We don't have all the answers. So how do we help folks get there? And I think what would be interesting to learn is there's ways that we can talk about how do you do change management or transformation. But what do you think, coming at this from a different perspective, what's the biggest blind spot do you think that organizations have when they think about getting their folks AI ready?
I could start on that one. For me, a blind spot is just failing to realize the urgency, whether that's due to an inability to understand what's happening or a lack of desire to. I think the result is still the same. You have a workforce that's going to be dealing with these changes, whether internally or externally, on the way the job works, on the way the company performs, on the way the company interacts outside of the company, and not having your leader understand what's coming, choosing that head in the sand approach. It's a disservice to their own staff and to their own careers as well. I think you really needed to be. You don't need to be an expert. You just at least need to have awareness and an open-mindedness to consider what's coming.
Agree.
Absolutely. I think there's two things that I typically see, and one is you kind of mentioned it, Rebecca, is the change management approach that you need to take, making or allowing the employees to see how valuable it is. Don't be scared. It's not here to take your job. It's here to enhance your role and allow you to do more things better. The other thing that I see is not being able to really define how that agentic AI is going to help the business. So making sure it's part of the business drivers. The more mature organizations can link agentic AI to helping the business and more importantly, allowing the employee to see how it's assisting the business and that it's a part of our strategy.
Yeah, and when we think about it that way, right, it's not an HR problem to solve the workforce readiness. It's a business problem that we need to solve together. So how are we tying the things that we are trying to impart to folks, right? Whether it's a new curriculum or whether it's a different way of thinking or, a new course. How are we tying that to organizational goals? How are we tying that to revenue? How are we tying that to something bigger than just sitting inside of HR? I think is difficult sometimes because it's not like we've been talking about like, well, it's not change management, it's transformation. And now the new buzzword is it's disruption. And I mean, I think it's all of it, right? It's all of it happening all at the same time. So how do we get, if you think about our learning organizations, and Kristen, maybe this is where you tap into what you did to transform your organization into a skills forward, with a skills forward approach, but how do we get content managers or learning learning folks, how do we change that mindset to growth architects and culture shapers or whatever words we want to use? How do we get out of the here, take this course and then you're going to be ready, or take this training, or let's impart a piece of content to you and then all will be well in the world? How do you start getting people to think differently about that, and we're shaping a bigger picture?
Part of it is what you just described. It's tying it back to those business objectives. I see our training content developers as business strategists as well, right? I'm not giving a training to get you a skill. I'm helping build an organization that can achieve our company's objectives, right? And it's in that framing. And I think it's also in recognizing it. We're not necessarily just giving a training, right? It is a part of a growth path. It is a part of a development path. And what we're going to do with that is bring people from where they are today and make sure that they still have a relevant shelf life of skills for the roles that are going to exist tomorrow. And we don't always know what those are going to be. But I think that's going to be really important. What is really cool, and this is something I'm really excited about, when we think of training, historically, you spend hours and hours developing content, and then you work with the business and you validate that content, and then you deliver the content over, again, several hours, days, weeks, months. And by the time you've gotten the content to the employees, there's a good chance that some of those pieces maybe feel a little outdated, maybe a little obsolete, especially in this unprecedentedly fast era that we're moving in, right? What I like is this idea that because we have AI to assist us with the development part, our people free up that mindset to really think about how do we want to move forward? How do we want to plan for the training that we need versus just the training that we have? And then the second piece that I find really cool, and David, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We have, unimaginably large data sets for how people interact, how they do their work, how they interact to the training, respond to the training. And since we can cut the time for content building, we can get that immediate user feedback, that user experience, and adapt what we're providing. Like we've shortened the time so that everything you get is what you need and nuanced and adaptable based on what you're saying you continue to need. I just find that really cool, but I don't know if you have different insights on that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of how we felt a little bit about the internet. Like we were worried that people were going to start to Google, things instead of ask their HR learning and talent colleagues how to do something. So there's an entire generation, especially the digital natives, who feel more comfortable going to Google and asking it a question on how do I do something? How do I learn a new skill? Maybe I go and I learn Excel through, YouTube instead of going to my learning platform. So that's one thing. But then we've really changed things. Now we have that generative AI, and everybody has some type of generative AI on their phone or on their computer. Maybe they're using their own, subscription. They can go out and ask it questions. It's much more pointed. Google's integrated it to allow you to have that generative capability right there. Or if, people are a Microsoft shop, they have those options. I think it's very similar. And it's going to be even more with the skills base. If somebody needs to learn a new skill, are we providing it as a learning department, the ability for them to get the best knowledge at their fingertips at the right time when they need it? So I think that's one thing that we can certainly learn. And then also, how do we provide an upskilling opportunities that are going to help them in the long run? What type of things? We obviously have competencies that are aligned to our organizational goals, but how do we build more durable skills that I can translate into whatever career I have, within the organization 3 months from now, or 9 years from now. And those are some things that we can really work with our employees on. How to, because they do have that generative AI, they have the agents, they have all kinds of different tools at their disposal that maybe they don't need to know Excel anymore, because I have a friend, an agent, that can build it a lot better than I can. And I used to be really good at Excel. I used to be certified, but it doesn't matter anymore. But instead, if you teach people how they can apply it, then all of a sudden they know what to go out with. Maybe we just start with teaching people how to prompt properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a shift in how you think, right? It's a very different way of coming at a problem. It's kind of turning it upside down, looking at it differently. And I think the other thing too is we have to be comfortable knowing that this isn't going to be a set in stone process. It is not going to look like this every day, hereforth, forever, in perpetuity, right? We have to say, this is what we're going to do for now. We're going to test it. We're going to try it. We're going to see, how do we feel about it? Because there was a comment that came in from one of our listeners that said, to be honest, AI isn't going to make everybody feel like their world is getting better, their jobs are getting easier, they're learning more. So I think that's a fair point, right? And so how are we helping people see the value in it, but also offering that ability to change for now, right? It's going to feel weird. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be challenging. How do we share that we're all in it together, thinking about working through this together as an organization, as opposed to maybe somebody feeling left out in a particular department, or maybe it's a more automated role. We need to also help people get there, whether it's just-in-time training, whether it's courses, or whether it's giving them free time to think, right? Maybe organizations can do, there's a lot that do that already. Like, hey, you get 15 minutes a day, or you get 2 hours a week, and we want you to think and research and come up with new ideas. I don't know. I could keep on that track, but I think it's probably time for us to shift to another aspect of that, right? Helping people feel engaged in their organization, comfortable using AI. Let's talk about pathways, career development. And so, Kristen, I want to come to you because of the skills work that you've done at BMS. And then David, I want your opinion. How can agentic AI, how can moving to a system that uses dynamic AI as a core, how can you personalize development pathways at scale, right? Individual growth patterns for everyone in your organization without having, an entire department made up of just coaches and career strategists?
Absolutely. And actually, it's fantastic because this is what we've been doing for the last few years at BMS. But what we did, we recognized the need to identify, the skills of our organization. That was going to be very important, right? In order to do, that sort of gap analysis of what skills do we have today and what skills do we need in the future and how do we bridge those gaps, we recognized, well, there's a need to actually know what skills do we have in the first place? What's that common language? When you realize that, and I'm coming to the part of how this gets to the development plan pieces, well, you need that data for this piece too. You need it both for employees' individual development, and you need it for the company. When you think of what does a company need, or what does an employee want to develop in, it's often tied to, well, what's my next job? What's my next role going to be in this company? And, we kind of talked, there used to be this structured, laddered approach. It was very simple. People liked it because you didn't have to think about what came next. You just went to the next step, and it was usually embedded as what was going to come. And we're kind of beyond that now. Roles don't necessarily work in that structured path in a lot of places in our organization. And so recognizing that if we found a system where we could have employees feed in the structured data around what skills they have, what skills they want to have, where we can say, what are the jobs we have in this company? What are the skills required for those jobs? And then add in layers of validation. And then let the AI do some magic and say, if this is who you are today and this is what you're interested in, maybe this is the role you have. What roles do you want? Let's not make the assumption of what roles you want, which is just the next level of where you are. And let's let the AI do that magic. Let's let it surface for you. What skills do you need to be ready for the roles you've indicated you're interested in? What skills do you need to be even better at your current job? And then let's go a step further and show you things like, cool, how can you build those skills? Maybe that's going to be through courses. Maybe that's going to be through projects and assignments where you actually get that hands-on experience with this work. And then let's surface those opportunities as well, right? Let's surface internal opportunities for you to build these different skill capabilities so that you can train yourself, upskill yourself, and get that next job. For a lot of employees, because we're in this new space where the job I do today isn't necessarily the job I will do for the next 30, 40 years, I may only be able to think 3 to 4 years into the future because the job that I have in 5 years may not exist today. Right? So thinking about skills, transferable skills, what do you like doing? What are you good at doing? What can you learn how to do that will be important? Thinking differently. And this is a huge mindset shift. I'm phrasing it very lightly, but to teach people who have for generations viewed this differently. It takes a lot of time, but what really helps is a fun user experience and a structured change approach, a phased change approach, right? As we're talking about this, there are probably some individuals super excited. Tell me more. Let me get in there. I want to give you all of my data. Show me what I can do. Show me the opportunities. Let me try. And then you're going to have the other side, David. I think you mentioned earlier, it scares some people, right? They don't want to do this. They don't want any part of it. It's like the internet. It doesn't exist and I never have to use it, right? Well, we know that's not true. You probably will have to use it at some point. But if we try to move at the speed of either of those, we're going to completely disengage the opposite group. And if we try to move in the middle, sure, we get a bulk majority, but again, disengaging those opposite groups. And what's really cool is that when you have those really excited people, and that's what we did here, we had people knocking down our door saying, can you let me have your tool first? Can you let us use this before anyone else? And that's what we did. We generated excitement. We said, wouldn't it be cool if you could have your own personalized development plan that shows you what roles you're good for, what skills you need to develop, and how to develop them? Some people, that was incredible. The people organization was one, IT was another, and some of our science groups were very excited. So getting them the chance to get in there first, what was really cool, we talk about this flying the plane while we're still building it kind of concept. Right? Nothing's perfect yet. Transparency was huge. Making sure people knew, like, look, it's not perfect. It's not the final stage. Are you sure you still want to see it? Usually, yes, absolutely. We want to see it. And then you had some self-aware folks who said, honestly, can you give it to me when it's a lot more solid? I'd rather wait. And then you have some who maybe it took a year before they finally created a profile, before they finally said, okay, let me go in the system and see what's happening. And those happen just through normal course of business because now, let's say we have these really cool development opportunities come up, they all feed into that same system. And so employees who say, I never got in there, but I want that opportunity, well, now they're joining the system. Now they're gaining those benefits just tangentially through it being a course of normal business. But that was a 2-year approach, all the way from I'm excited, let me in, it's not perfect, but I still want to play with it, to your normal adopters who say, cool, this is how we do it now. We're going to talk about it. All the way to now, these are the last, 10, 15% who are saying, okay, I think I'm interested now because it has something in it for me. I see what it can do for me.
Yeah.
So, long approach, but important.
No, I think that's great. And one thing I just wanted to ask about is I'm assuming, especially for those early adopters, because what you started in the beginning, I'm guessing is not what your last 10 to 15% is looking at. When you're doing that, I'm assuming you've got feedback loops that you're building in, right? You're not just saying, oh, we're just going to create and the heck with y'all, right? Like, I'm assuming that you're going through saying, what kind of feedback is coming in? And then that also builds that trust and transparency because people feel a part of it and they understand not only this is what it looked like, but my feedback got us to the next level. I'm assuming you built that in, right? So can you tell us a little bit about those feedback loops?
Absolutely. And there were several, in fact. One that I really enjoyed working with, we have a change champion network. They're called Working Smarter. These are people who love testing new AI, new tools, new ways of working. These are people who want to see it and they want to try to break it. That they are so excited for this. I am part of that group. It is so much fun when they say, this tool isn't ready yet, but tell me what you think. Happily, would love to tell you what I think. That was one of those groups. That's an early group of super users, I would call them. These are people who understand ML and LLM and other techie type abbreviations that the average population probably has never heard. So you've got that one group, that's one of your early user groups. And then for the others, it's partnering with business leaders, getting them in line, getting them to buy in to actually, no, I see how this works for my group. Because what you can notice, let's say you have various job banks where all sorts of opportunities are surfaced in many disparate places. If you don't have the business coming in with you, feeding that information for opportunities, well, then your system's not going to have all of the information. And what a lot of people find frustrating is if it's not all in one place, I'm not going to go to multiple places. I'm going to go to the easiest place. And so making this the easiest solution meant that asking a lot of questions of both employees, managers, HR business partners, and business leaders, what do your people value? What's easy? And then having user experience sessions, like how many clicks did it take you to get there? Was that too many? Do we need to change where things are so that you just have a user experience that's easy, seamless, and gives you what you need when you need it?
That's wonderful.
Sorry, I had to mute. It was really loud back here. Go ahead, David.
I thought that was the case. I like how you started as well. We've moved from the career ladder to the career lattice, and then like creating all of those different opportunities for people. All of a sudden, HR was responsible for all of these different items, but then you add in the rate of change. And it's like, if you printed this out when I did my performance review at the beginning of the year, like it's no longer useful because things are changing so fast. And literally the skills are changing, by the minute. And then, like you said, that feedback loop of, learning and reiterating at the same time, you're really developing an ecosystem where the whole job progression is changing. And I really love that.
And so funny that you say that, David. And then I have also thought on what you said as well, Kristen. When we talk about jobs that continue to grow, right? We developed the role that I'm in right now, our group, which is talent-centered transformation. And when we put together, so Jason Serrato, who was leading the team, put together, here's what I think this team should do, and had, we had some goals and things that we were supposed to do. We went back and revisited after a year. It's significantly different. Like, we're still doing some of the same things, different flavors. We're like, well, that felt like a good idea on paper. In real life, nope, that actually wasn't very helpful. So like, our roles are continuing to change. If you had asked me a year ago if I would be talking about agentic AI and some of the other things that we're talking about, not even just my role of, the things on the job description, but the things we're talking about and we're building and we're doing, significantly different. And then my thought on what you said, Kristen, too, because I think this is really important when we think about a skills transformation, an AI transformation, and understanding where people are and what they want to do. I think especially when you're building that trust and transparency, making it okay for folks to break, David, as you said, that career ladder, even that career lattice, right? Like, we have to make it okay to say, a lateral move will build my experience way faster than sometimes going directly from an individual contributor to leadership. Or I was in leadership for a while and whatever, the role changed, or maybe I said, I don't really want to lead people anymore. I want to dig into the science. I want to dig into something else, and moving into an individual contributor role, right? I think we have to normalize that the roles and the titles are less important than the work that you're actually doing, right? So if you say, I want to move here, and that means I'm no longer leading a team, that's not a demotion, right? We have to talk about the things that are happening in the business differently. So I don't know if either of you have a point of view on that, and then I've got, a whole slew of questions, but thoughts on any of that?
I do actually, because in my business partner space, this is actually a common conversation that I have with my leaders of, how are we developing people? And the common thing they come to is, well, the employee wants to be promoted. Well, don't we all, right? Or maybe not.
Absolutely. Every day we want to be promoted, right?
Right. And so asking that deeper question, it's the next question. It's, well, what do they want to do, right? I think we
Yes.
started this call saying, okay, but what do you want to be doing? What work makes
Asking
you
that
excited
different
to come to work? Absolutely. Normally, when I would ask that question, they didn't have an answer, and they say, "Huh, well, I don't know." The next logical step was promoted here. It's like, okay, well, if that's not open today, what is? Where else could they go? Where else could they have skills that are useful to other parts of the business? It's asking questions to help shift that mindset. And sometimes it's as simple as that. The conversation moves forward and we identify opportunities, but we need to have the mindset as leaders and coming from HR, and we need our business to build that capability to have that mindset.
Yeah, agree. David, any last thoughts before we move to the action section of the webinar?
I would love to hear the action section. I have some ideas, but I think I'll save that for another talent table. But
Okay, David, you're coming back. Take a note, our producing team. Okay. All right, so let's talk about, I mean, we have all kinds of great thoughts and we can say all kinds of things, but if people aren't able to do them, it's really just talking into the air, right? And so we want to give folks that are joining us some ways to think differently. And how could you start? What could a baby step look like? Or how do you start the conversation? So when we're thinking about especially changing the way we train or the way that we impart information, what would be a step for folks, especially if they're stuck more in that, check box, took this training, done? Like, what would be a step for them to take to move from checkbox training to impact? So where do people start?
well, I would say the first thing they can do is really understand the business drivers. So if you want to get out of that checkbox mentality, understanding what the business needs, having those conversations. I know, Kristen, you have that new role and you're seeing it so much more. So I'd love to hear from you, but that's the number one thing for me. I wanted to jump in and say that, and Kristen, love to unpack it in a practical sense.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fair. And when we think from a change approach and we think, where do you even start? Know your workforce. There's not going to be the same answer for every company because the mix of employees, the business objectives you have, where your business is in its cycle of doing things, it's going to be different, right? So I think the first thing is know who your workforce is because it will be different. Maybe you have an entire workforce of early adopters or people who barely use computers, right? We have an entire segment of our workforce that work in a lab. They very rarely have access to a computer. If they do, it's 10 minutes for email at the start of the day. That's a very different population. I'm probably not going to approach them first, and I'm certainly not going to approach them the same way. I'm going to have a different strategy for that. And so that's where I would say pilots, betas, get comfortable saying, like, this is not my formal HR approach that I'm rolling out and everything is perfect, which I think we've often expected from HR, right? By the time it gets to the business, it is as perfect as it's going to get. And the reality today is a lot of our stuff's not done. It's just due. And the deadline is whatever business driver you have, David, to your point. So really, to me, the takeaway is be transparent that it may not be perfect. Just start, put something out there, but know who they are and know how it's relevant for them. If you aren't able to explain why something is relevant to those employees, to that business, why should they spend their time on it? Time is a very precious commodity, right? We talked about that. I think I've seen that theme throughout this conversation is if I have more time, how am I spending it? And we want them to choose to spend it here, not tell them they have to spend it here and them see it as another thing they have to do.
Right. Kristen, I love what you said about, I just wrote it down. It's not done, it's just due. And I added it's just due for now. I really like that idea of it's not baked, it's baking, right? So something's due and whatever it looks like, that final product could be down the road. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and shamelessly steal that. It's not done, it's just due for now.
I'll let my old art teacher know that you would like to use it.
Is that where I heard it?
It is. Think about it. When you're doing an art project, are you ever really done? There's always something else you can do to that art piece. It's
Yes.
maybe our careers are kind of like that too. A lot of the processes you roll out, there's always more we can do. There's always some other little thing we can be changing on it. At some point, it's just due, though.
Yeah, I like that. And one more question for you, and then David, I wanted to get your feedback. There was also a question that came in. And so when you did your skills transformation and you put in all of these new pieces and worked to get people moving forward, how did you measure the ROI or the impact of that? Did you look at, and I'm sure you're still in the middle of that, are you looking at number of people changing jobs? Are you looking at promotions? Are you looking at retention? Like, what kind of things are you evaluating to determine the impact of this transformation?
Looking at a lot of things, and I can share a few. One of the easiest indicators that you can see of engagement is, are people even building profiles in the tool that shows our skills and shows their development? A secondary piece, we had a prior system for development planning, which was in our employee workforce data tool that we use. And I want to say that was a very low percentage. And so we had a goal. We wanted to at least match that percentage. We not only matched it, we exceeded it, right? So people are not only in the tool, they're using the tool. We could also check things like, are you going back? You know, historically, we could tell in the previous development planning system, you maybe touched it once a year, if you touched it once a year. And like you mentioned with your business objectives, your role, a year, things so much change, right? And so that was another metric that we could look at. And then also seeing how many people are taking things like those projects, those out of role assignments, those things that are above and beyond your day job. Is that in your function? Is that out of your function? Are you changing jobs? Are you promoting into new jobs? Did you identify them through our platform? Did talent acquisition identify you? Because our talent acquisition team is able to proactively identify candidates. I think you've heard this before, but a common thing that's been said in the business world is LinkedIn knows our people better than we do. That's astonishing for me. It's like, I want to know my people well, right? These are amazing people. I want to believe I hired them for a reason. And then I'm assuming it's the skills that they bring to the table. So where else can they use those skills that benefits them and benefits us? So there's a lot of metrics around internal mobility. Are you moving? Where are you moving? Did you identify it through our tool? Did we identify you proactively? These are things we weren't necessarily looking at before. We might have wondered how many people are moving and tracked that. We had development plan metrics, but this whole ecosystem where we're looking across that employee life cycle from the moment you join us to the moment you continue changing and exiting, what have you done? Have we used you? Not used you, sounds terrible. Have we identified you for other opportunities? That's a much better way to phrase that.
I love that. I love it. All right, David, thoughts on any of that?
Absolutely. I think, just talking a little bit about that employee engagement piece, if you look at just like an employee engagement survey, you kind of have like that entry level, hey, we're going to do an annual, paper-based form that goes out and not a lot happens afterwards. And then you get a little bit better and maybe you have that online pulse assessment that you have some machine learning, going back to some of our alphabet soup that really identifies some sentiment analysis within your entire organization. But I think where most people want to get is to like that continuous listening, where AI might help intervene in certain areas, but then, looking out to the future, there are some futuristic organizations that are doing more AI engagement, really proactive management, based on what they're seeing their employees do. And then really, I think, we're a couple years potentially is that predictive engagement, really that prevention focus of, getting ahead of the curve, knowing things, like you said, LinkedIn knows before I do that, somebody's going to leave, really understanding where that comes from. So there's lots of different tiers. And I think understanding where you are and where your organization is, I think that's one thing that organizations miss is, they need that pulse of the organization. What is the AI readiness within my organization? And make sure, either I'm within those certain levels that's going to be comfortable. I want to push the boundaries a little bit, but I don't want to break anything.
Yeah. And I want to, go ahead, Kristen.
David, thank you, Rebecca. David, you said something that I was just thinking about in our own organization that got us really excited. Historically, training has been centered around this sort of compliance-based training, right? Anything that was required was compliance-based. What we've done very recently, and I think this is a positive indication of where we're going and how we view learning, is that for the first time, we're having required AI training. Now, part of that is some compliance-based, right, in terms of like responsible use of AI. You want to make sure you're using it appropriately, but it's not exclusively about how do you use it appropriately. It's how do you use it to make your job better. And that's become a required training. And I just think it's so encouraging to see non-compliance-based training become a requirement as part of your job. The idea that we don't take you in as a static individual, we take you in as a growing individual, and we continue to aid that growth. Sorry, when you said that, it really, really got me excited.
There's
Yeah,
no
that's
apologies.
wonderful.
That was great. So one thing I want to tack on here, and a question came in about how are we thinking about high pro talent, and we used to call them high pro and high po, right? Like, so thinking about those folks that are on that fast track, and then those folks who are broadening out their high pros that they're going to be in a role maybe for a long time, but really have wide experience. In my take on this, and I'd love to have you both weigh in, is my take on this is that when we have learning at scale, and when we shift our organization from a reactive take the checkbox training to proactive curiosity that invades our culture, it becomes less about us having to identify a high pro or a high po, and we won't have to have those specific training classes. It always felt a little strange, right? Like, especially being in HR for as long as I was prior to coming over to Eightfold, it always felt strange to say, we have selected somebody, you are now in the high potential group, and then always kind of felt exclusionary. But now I think we have the opportunity to equalize that, and we're looking at different factors, right? We're looking at curiosity, we're looking at the ability to grow, and I always talk about my resume as a list of things I never want to do again. And I think we also now have the ability to equalize that, because maybe somebody didn't have the opportunity to showcase something that wasn't on their resume. So they were identified as a steady Eddie, or not a high potential, but maybe they just didn't have a chance to show that. So my thought is thinking about from a skills-based approach and an opportunity to do that at scale, we may identify a whole bunch of people who have skill sets or abilities that we didn't see. And maybe that eliminates a high po program, because we're moving people around in a bunch of different ways. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. So what do y'all think about that? David, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think one thing that you said is often the scariest is usually it's the manager that says this person's a high potential
Exactly.
employee. And so it's very biased based on the manager selecting. What if there's somebody that's really doing a great job and maybe might not be best friends with the manager? Now we have all of this data, and now we have for a while, but we didn't know how to use it. Now all of a sudden we're understanding better how to use that data and like look at certain things that the employee is doing. We can, depending on your comfortability with AI, you can really identify people based on their activities. Are they doing things like giving other people kudos in Slack or whatever, internal platform you have? Things like that only come from people that are more high potential, because they just think differently. Identifying little things like that a manager might not have said this person's high potential, but that's like one little checkbox. And then these little checkboxes add up. All of a sudden you're identifying people that maybe would have been overlooked and allowing them to have those opportunities to, be a part of an upskilling program.
Yeah. Kristen, what are your thoughts?
When I think of high potentials, what I'm hearing from David and what I agree with is that it's a collection of data points that tell us if that person is high potential, but it's also the pull through. If this person is high potential, but never leaves this role, what does that potential equate to? Does it go anywhere? Or was it just a biased indicator? And so I think pulling through not only like what are those precursors, but what are the outcomes, and using skill as the common language to help explain those things. Because you're right, David, a lot of times there's bias baked in, and there's bias in skills as well, right? I mean, we're human, there's going to be, but giving that language, making it a little more clear of, if you're going to say someone's high potential, what skills do they have? What do you mean when you say they are high potential? Do you mean they are well connected? Are they sociable? Or do they have certain leadership qualities? What does leadership mean, right? Defining those down makes it a lot easier to quantify and a lot easier to build as well, because in a lot of cases, someone could be a high potential if they just knew what they needed to learn, right? And a lot of those skills are learnable if they know what they are.
Well, and what I think about the high potential programs that I know of from the companies I've been a part of haven't necessarily been tied, as we talked about, to that organizational impact. We have just arbitrarily identified people to put into a program that we think are going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. But when we start tying it to organizational objectives, then we can identify anybody in the organization, no matter what their title, their role, or level, to say they can help us drive that impact. So it becomes less of a exclusive club and more about what are we trying to do? And everybody can be at different levels, and that's okay, right? Your title shouldn't just determine if you're part of this or that you went to a particular school, or David, as you said, if you're better friends and you go out drinking with the manager, whatever, right? Like that shouldn't define it. It should be about the skills you bring to the table and the impact it brings to the organization. So, okay, we're past the home stretch. We're like in the home stretch. We're like 3 minutes from ending here. So I'm going to ditch a couple of questions. But one thing that I really do want to make sure we end on is we've talked a lot about tactical things, right? We've talked about how do we measure impact? How are we looking at ROI? How are we looking at the outcomes? But I think it all comes back to, in my opinion, it comes back to that mindset. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable. We have to be willing to change. We have to be willing, potentially, maybe to blow up structures that feel really comfortable and challenge and say, we've got to turn this on its head, because if we continue to do things the same way, we are going to get stuck. So what I'd like to know from both of you is, what is that? Sorry, it's gonna be loud. There's some kind of truck going by and I don't have time to close the window. Okay, so what is the single most important mindset shift that leaders need to put into place to think about what success looks like in a new way of working? Does that make sense? How are we thinking about that mindset shift? So Kristen, we'll go with you, and then David will wrap up with you.
Okay. There's a lot of things I could say. I know we're at time, so I'll keep it brief. Curiosity. Truthfully, at the end of the day, if you are curious, it will make you more agile. It'll make you more resilient. It'll make you more learner focused. It comes down to that curiosity, that willingness to be interested in something new. And David?
Yeah, and I think my approach is also simple in that I think we're overthinking things sometimes with AI particularly. At the end of the day, it's still about people, process, and technology. You need to understand your people, you need to build a strong process, and you need technology that supports that. At the end of the day, that's still what it boils down to.
Totally agree with that overcomplication. Sometimes we just feel like, oh, we're never going to get there. You just have to start, right? And that curiosity. So what you talked about, Kristen, that curiosity, not just at the leadership level, but encouraging everybody in the organization to ask questions, to learn, to think differently, to be okay with, as you said, David, instead of making it overcomplicated, let's dip our toe in the water. Let's figure it out. Let's make sure that it honors people. Let's make sure that it's a fair process. And let's make sure that we've got the right tech in place. So, all right, y'all have been awesome. I have many notes and many things that we're going to carry over into some kind of future session with all of the things that you've shared and the things that we didn't even get to. So thanks for your time, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to our next talent table in November. So take a look in that resources section to be able to, or maybe some widgets, but take a look to see about signing up for next month. And with that, we are out. Have yourself a great day, all.
Thank you. Bye.